Right, so you're looking to play the new Rhinar Armory deck for Brute. Well, buckle on in. We've got a few things to talk about. So this is actually my third go at recording this, because usually what I like to do is I record something and I leave it for a couple days and then I go to edit it. That way I can try and pick up a bit better on stuff I've missed or, things I've rethought and want to change. So when it comes to the Rhinar Armory deck, it's a whole bag of mixed feelings, I want to say, right? So the initial idea was we were just going to talk about the deck list, right? How it runs, some of the card choices, the inclusions. Is it okay, right? And then, yeah, I looked over it, I thought about it a bit more, and I think I maxed myself again, right? So we got real into the Max Armory deck, and I did play it, and I did enjoy it, but obviously that deck was a bit lackluster itself and didn't really move the needle for Max overall. Anyway, now when it comes to this for Rhinar, well, yeah, mixed feelings. We'll leave it at that for now as we get into the cards and I explain it a little bit better. But then the second video I was going to record, right, or second attempt at it, was a comparison to a proper Rhinar deck courtesy of Eugene. So performing at Battle London, placing second, this is what a properly tuned Rhinar deck looks like. So from here, we can get a better approximation of where the Armory deck sits, but they are very much oil and water, right? They are very contrasting in what they're trying to do and how the deck is designed. And, there's rationale behind that, right? They really want to push the beat chest mechanic. They also really want to make it a new player-friendly deck. But in doing so, I think they've cut out a lot of the heart of Brutes. And I'm just going to say it, I don't really like this deck straight out of the box. So, yeah. Let's get to why, right? Let's take a look at the actual cards in deck and what you can kind of do with it. So, starting off, let's take a look at a few different hands for the deck, right? Try and understand what exactly is going on, what are you intended to do? Is it aggro? Is it mid-range? The value behind your different turns, different possibilities, and get a better understanding of the deck overall before we get into, the nitty-gritty of specific cards, especially the new stuff. So, before you right now, this playline I perceive as sort of the bread and butter playline of the deck, given what's, in the actual list. So it is Bonebreaker Bellow, pitching a blue, discarding Strong Survive as our 6+ power card, and then playing an extra card on top of that, all to swing with Romping Club as a sizable chunk of damage. So this whole hand play gets you Intimidate 2 and swings Romping Club for 13. As sort of a benchmark, you can compare it to KO. KO as a properly tuned aggro deck can easily push, 14 plus a turn. So this is still kind of below that, but then you have that Intimidate factor. That is what's meant to carry you over the line as a Rhinar. You intimidate away a few of your opponent's cards, and you leave them very awkwardly with certain cards left that they might want to play and not block with. So yeah, it is definitely nice in that regard. You're getting that little bit extra Rhinar value overall, so it's not awful. But at the same time, is it competitively tuned? Is it Armory deck level tuned? I don't think so, right? Because again, this is the bread and butter hand, right? This is the starting point before we sort of go downhill. Now, in terms of this hand, it also does leave you a little bit of flexibility, right? So we could be able to block with one card. The Smell Fear can be either played here or blocked, so that is definitely nice. That gives us some of that mid-range value. But, overall no disruption other than, again, trying to yoink cards from your opponent by intimidating the cards that they want to block with and leaving them no choice but to block with the cards that they do want to play. So, again, overall, right, it's pretty average to start. But the crux of it is, for this specific playline that I'm showcasing, you'd need specifically a blue to play the Bonebreaker Bellows, or you need specifically at least a yellow to play any of the other buff cards, the Smell Fears, or anything else that sort of acts as an opener to your turn. Now, if we were to swap our Romping Club to an attack, well, Rawhide Rumble works fine, right? So in this scenario, we'd be able to use those 2 extra resources from the Bonebreaker Bellow to swing with Rawhide Rumble for 11 and intimidate 3 cards. So again, pushing a sizable amount of damage and trying to get something out of your opponent's hand that they potentially would rather play. Now, the issue here is Rawhide Rumble is one of the few 2-cost attacks in the actual deck. So again, if you specifically had a blue and one of the 0-cost openers, you could definitely use any of the 3-cost attacks that plague the deck. But overall, we're not very far in, and there's already definitely some clear awkwardness in draw potential and hands to play. So yeah, it's not a good outlook. The other aspect to sort of compare is Romping Club again was that little bit extra damage utilizing that extra card. So that extra card, even if it's not something you could play directly that turn, right? For instance, in this scenario, if Rawhide Rumble was something we'd want to Arsenal, then Romping Club would still be for 10, right? Making it still a bit more comparable to Rawhide Rumble, and maybe we get that extra value somewhere else. We prolong it to another turn, which is definitely something you want to do with this deck. You don't want to be dumping your hand. You want to be either blocking and then trying to set up something a little bit bigger than what we're seeing right now. Now, the issue is, again, 3-cost attacks and our 1-cost Bonebreaker Bellow, or basically anything else, right? So in this scenario, Bonebreaker Bellow plus a 3-cost attack just doesn't work, right? We'd have to have one of those 0-cost openers if we were to use one of the 3-cost attacks. And that is definitely a rough point of synergy, because you really want that double dip on your beat chest, right? You're not getting that redraw value like all the other random draw discard cards that Brute has access to, so you really need to double dip on beat chest to get value out of it. So ideally here, getting both the extra bonus from Bonebreaker Bellow and the agility for Assault and Boundary would be fantastic, but we just can't stretch it in terms of resources. Not only that, again, it's just an average turn that still requires us to have specifically a blue, specifically a cheaper opening card, and not block whatever our opponent is trying to do. So yeah, it's definitely open to disruption from your opponent, and again, that awkwardness from just drawing through the cards that are currently in the deck. Now, that brings us to one of the big new cards in the deck, Bear Destruction. So Bear Destruction is one of your really strong beat chest attack openers. When this attacks, if you've been chest this turn and you do not control a chest equipment, then Bear Destruction gets go again, and the next brute attack action card you play this turn gets +2. So it potentially being a 2 for 6 with go again that then pushes 2 extra power onto your next attack is fantastic, right? But as it stands currently, we'd be able to play it off of a blue or a yellow. So in this scenario, if we had a blue, we'd have 1 resource floating, but we still need to discard a card. So what can then we do to follow up? Well, most likely swing. So yeah, if we had a yellow, then we'd still have to pitch 2 into our Romping Club. If we had a blue, we'd have to pitch a red. So, that's forgivable. But Bear Destruction does not work with Romping Club. Bear Destruction targets specifically Brute's attack action cards to get its extra level of value, making it considerably worse, right? So if you could just weapon swing after it, that would be absolutely phenomenal. It would be such a fantastic, worthy, majestic card. But as it is, again, you are struggling for resources and not doing as much as you really need to when trying to keep your whole hand to play something like this. So again, no matter what other attack we had in hand, we wouldn't be able to play, right? This is the best case scenario where we still have that 1 extra floating resource after playing Bear Destruction, but even Rawhide Rumble, the cheapest cost attack in the deck, aside from Bear Destruction, just can't be played, right? So this is where the equipment really comes into play. The equipment acts as a failsafe. We have Echo Cask and Talk of Vim, and both of these are basically just on board to make Bear Destruction workable, and that, to me, feels horrendous, right? In my opinion, it is completely an issue of the vacuum of the deck, right? These equipment pieces are not bad. Bear Destruction is not bad, but as the deck is currently made, they are horrendous together and a crutch, in my eyes, in all honesty, to a new player. Having equipment be specifically used for this card is not a great scenario to teach players, right? It is a bubble that Flesh and Blood should not fall into. But again, to make Bear Destruction work as a reasonable value card, it needs Echo Cask or Talk of Vim in the current Rhinar list. So, in either scenario, right, most likely this is what you're trying to do. Bear Destruction, you crack your Talk of Vim so Bear Destruction is online, because again, it has that beat chest mechanic that requires you to not have a chest equipment piece. So that activates it, you then get that discount, and all of a sudden we can play the majority of attacks in our deck. Now, there is still, again, very awkward situations where you need a blue if you have a 3-cost attack, right? Because Talk of Vim is only a -2. If you had a yellow and you have a 3-cost attack to follow up Bear Destruction, you're out of luck. And you don't even have the fallback of Talk of Vim discounting Romping Club, for instance, because it does only affect brute attack action cards similar to Bear Destruction, right? So again, there's not enough flexibility there. You need specific things in your hand when you go to utilize this combination. And again, that is just a feels bad moment to me overall. So most likely, your first Bear Destruction uses your Talk of Vim, and then hopefully you can play that second attack, either, again, having pitched a blue into Bear Destruction to play a 3-cost attack, which again, there are way too many of them in the deck, or you got lucky and you draw Rawhide Rumble, and that's golden, right? You go yellow into Bear Destruction, Rawhide Rumble off of Talk of Vim, and happy days. Now, for the second go, you have Bear Destruction and Echo Cask. So essentially, Echo Cask makes Bear Destruction a 3-cost discard draw, right? Which is, again, reasonable enough. But now you're really at the whims of drawing correctly, right? You still have that extra card in hand. So between what you had in hand and what you draw, hopefully you can play them. And hopefully it's not just a case of, well, I missed, I'm swinging my Romping Club, and what should be, the power spike in my turn, because I've dumped equipment, I've used what should be a really strong Majestic, is now a 11. Yeah? So, first Bear Destruction, should earmark your Talk of Him. Second one, your Echo Cask. And then the third copy, well, yeah. That's where you sort of run out of steam, and Bear Destruction drops off immensely, because the deck, to me, is just not built for it, right? You need either an Arsenal card, and then if you have that Arsenal card, you have needed to not have that Arsenal card destroyed in a turn where you don't block. Because again, to get the use out of Beat Chest, you really are looking at having a almost full hand. So overall what this means is you need a full hand in order to then go Bear Destruction, Talk of Him, into another attack, be it Rawhide Rumble, or again one of those 3 costs, to push 14 to maybe 15 damage, right? That is your spike turn, 14 to 15, when again, going back to KO, that's what you're pushing out most turns. Yeah, that is definitely rough to look at, but again, that's where Intimidate hopefully really matters. And don't you just wish there was a card that allowed you to capitalize a little bit more on Intimidate? Yeah, we'll get to that one. But in the case of your other attacks, so again, we've gone through your bread and butter buff turns into Romping Club, your other strong pieces for the deck, but what about the big chunk left of it, right? So yeah, there are a ton of 3-cost attacks in the deck, and a huge dependency on generating agility so that you can deliver something at least semi-decent. Now again, we're looking at full hand plays, because again, you're either just blocking a little bit, sending negligible damage when you compare it to a properly built mid-range to fatigue class, and in all honesty, that just doesn't feel good, right? So yeah, full hand, Intimidate 1, Solemn Battery, hopefully again with that agility token that we can continue to steamroll into our Romping Club. Now, the other aspect of the deck that you definitely do want to consider is you don't have to beat chest. Problem is, if you don't beat chest, there's not really much going on, right? Your only go again pieces of Bear Destruction, requires Beat Chest, or Buck Wild, and Buck Wild as well is a horribly awkward card in the deck that most likely only works with Romping Club. So in order to play Buck Wild effectively, you would need to pitch a yellow 6, right? Because yes, you could bank on one of the 2 blue 6 power cards to turn on Buck Wild, maybe it lines up, but most likely you're pitching either a red or yellow into Buck Wild along with an extra card to pay for its cost, and then you're following up with a Romping Club, right? All that for a total of 10 damage, right? Just raw damage, no on-hit effects, no Intimidate, no extra discard to Romping Club, and maybe a solitary card to give as a block. So again, you're hitting the average value spot on, right? And that is definitely nice to some degree, but the deck honestly feels like it should snowball, not lag, little peak, lag, right? So yeah, I feel like it's stuck in the middle of what it's trying to be. It doesn't compare to aggro, and it's definitely not good enough as a mid-range deck, because it's missing some of that crucial disruption that helps carry a mid-range deck, let alone then getting into the territory of being, a fatigue deck where you can block out and try to definitely line up all your good stuff for the very end. Not going to work, right? So, in terms of the deck overall, this is sort of the breakdown that we'll go with, right? There are 23 reds, 16 yellows, and 21 blues. So, it's fair across the board, but again, most hands you want a blue and a yellow, right? So, chances are, how often is that going to line up, and how often is your discard piece going to be a card that you don't want to pitch, essentially, right? Now, in terms of openers, so again, this is either something with Go Again, or one of those buff cards. There's 6 reds, 6 yellows, and 15 blues, and that also feels a little bit miserable, because again, that goes back to the aspect where you want to pitch them around, hold them to late, and then all of a sudden you're sending Romping Club for a decent amount of value over and over again. But again, doesn't work with Beat Chest, because you'll run through all your 6s, and you'll be left with nothing. Then in terms of misses, so yeah, misses do still matter in this type of deck, even if it's not subject to the normal randomness of Brute. There are 3 red misses, 3 yellow misses, and 15 blue misses. So again, your blues double as either you pitch or a card you want to play. And to essentially start off your deck to even going into that middle ground area of your fab game cycle, right, wanting to play your blues, doesn't feel great, right? Now, in terms of attacks, there are 3 Go Again Reds, Bear Destruction, pending its ability, and then Buck Wilds for yellow. Then there are a total of 6 2-cost attacks, and that definitely feels rough. And then we get into the 3-cost attacks. 14 reds, 13 yellows, and 6 blues, being, again, Alpha Instinct and Wreck a Romp, cards that you most likely want to pitch, or eventually discard, especially in the case of Alpha Instinct. So, yeah, again, your best possible turn, holding your hand and trying to race your opponent, would be a 3-cost into Romping Club or a 3-cost into a 2-cost. And that is just really, really rough to do, right? In all honesty, it's really unfortunate to see because there are cards from Super Slam in this deck, and there's plenty of other cards in Super Slam that I think would have fit the deck really well as well. Starting off with Give Them a Piece of Your Mind, right? For this to not be in an Intimidate deck seems really, really awkward, right? So give them a piece of your mind. When the combat chain closes, if this didn't hit, the defending hero gets to create a Vigor token. And that is definitely the type of effect, not to mention stat line, a 2 for 7 in red or a 2 for 6 in yellow, that you really want, because you want to empty a few cards from their hand and either force them into using their equipment, right, and get off the board nice and early, or just have an effect like this stick because they can't fully block it out, right? That is perfect for Intimidate, and instead of Give Them a Piece of Your Mind, you have Pound Town, right? A 3-cost that offers a little bit extra value if you get lucky and it's the card you want to play along with your other beat chest cards. And trust me, it's probably not the card you want to play unless it's the only card in your hand, right? So yeah, I really wish Give Them a Piece of Your Mind. It's perfect as a discard, and it's a reasonable effect with a much better stat line that fits what the deck is trying to do. Now, in terms of an upgrade route, it also then offers a clear-cut, go get this card and replace this with it, right? Give Them a Piece of Mind easily transitions into Show of Strength or Swing Big as your better 2-cost brute attacks. And that's definitely a rationale that I would love to see a bit more emphasized in the decks, because they like doing the upgrade pathways on the little pages, but a lot of the time they're just stock standard to the hero at the time, rather than here's the direct choice and the direct rationale. Now, in terms of other suitable cards, Rumble Grunting, right? So again, to me, the deck feels sort of caught in the middle, where you have some emphasis on, buffing Swing with Romping Club to an intimidated hand, or trying to string together some attacks. And Rumble Grunting is definitely a nice card to, again, work in conjunction with Beat Chest. It itself doesn't have Beat Chest, but it still has a similar effect to Beat Chest, where you can only have played it if you have discarded a card with 6 or more power this turn. So if you get a Beat Chest proc off, you essentially turn on Rumble Grunting, and they are decently statted buffs, right? So the red is a 0 for 4, and the blue is still a 0 for 2. So yeah, they would definitely be nice to tack on in the deck to, again, maybe go down that path of emphasizing a little bit more. You are just a value club swinger, right? Now, other suitable cards I feel from Super Slam, Flex Speed and Flex Strength. So Flex Strength again being a essentially 2 for 7 with the amount of buffs that are actually in the deck. All right, the lowest buff is a 2, so that onto Flex Strength triggers its effect. Similarly, it also triggers Flex Speed, and for me personally, Flex Speed in that regard seems a lot easier to play than Buck Wild, because again, Buck Wild, you have to pitch a 6 power card into it in order to turn it on. And again, that's just a lot more awkward for any hero that isn't KO armed and dangerous. So yeah, Give Them a Piece of Mind is definitely a really sorely missed card, but I think there could have been a place for either of these. Now, the other big card that really should have been in it to start is Splinter Skull. So Splinter Skull right up there as a perfect Intimidate style card. When this hits a hero, choose a face down card in their bash zone that was banished by Intimidate this turn, put it into their graveyard. This is the perfect disruption card, and I think as a starting point, it is significantly better than Beast Within, right? Beast Within is fantastic. The rationale there is it's probably the way you get that third Bear Destruction off. But Beast Within in the current Rhinar deck will lead to those awful moments where you hit 2+ non-6 power cards and you take a chunk of damage, and that might end up losing you the game, right? So Beast Within definitely has a place in the deck once it's a little bit more finely tuned. But to start off, Splinter Skull was just bread and butter, right? So to not see it in the deck is very, very unfortunate. It is the perfect card to highlight Rhinar's ability and give him a proper payoff. Now, the other one to talk about, Bloodrush Bellow. So I've seen a little bit here and there that Bloodrush Bellow just wouldn't fit the deck because of the number of misses. But I think you're missing the point of Beat Chest. Beat Chest offers you consistency in not only what you discard, but also shaping your hand. So to be able to get rid of a card or two and then have Bloodrush Bellow line up a lot better could really be workable. Because again, beat chest is optional. So if you just play a beat chest buff, sure, you don't get the full effect, but you could still shape your hand to the point where you can Blood Rush Bellow, right? You have your one card that maybe was meant to feed into your beat chest, plus a beat chest card, plus another card, right? You just pitch it into Blood Rush Bellow, and job's done. You still get the value out of Blood Rush Bellow, and you get really good value out of Blood Rush Bellow, because it is just a really good value card. Not to mention then again, that the deck does lean itself to wanting to Arsenal, and again, have those big pushes of damage, right? Especially again, capitalizing on Intimidate, where you block a little, swing, Romping Club, swing, something decent enough, Arsenal card, and then that following turn you have that big oomph and spike, right? So, yeah, I think Blood Rush Bellow is definitely workable. Should it start in the current list? Probably not, but it is definitely something to consider for the deck overall. But let's get to some more concrete upgrades before we go over the deck list a little bit more, right? So in terms of upgrades, Mandible Claw, bread and butter card for Brute as it currently stands until KO goes. It will just be the best weapon, simply because, again, the flexibility and the fact that you can still take a reasonable other one-handed card with it, right? You take Ball Breaker with Rhinar, and you're just dropping off one value in terms of it to Romping Club, but adding so much more flexibility to what you can do. Then we have Splatter Skull, again, just fundamentally a beautiful card for what Rhinar wants to do. Beast Within definitely helps, but can be a double-edged sword in this style of deck. The fact that it does guarantee you an attack can definitely be nice, depending on what you're using it in conjunction with to, discard it. And then Show of Strength, Swing Big are just your core 2 for 8s. That, again, should probably make the cut for most Brute lists. Then, in terms of further upgrades, Scab Skins. Now, we didn't really touch on trampling trackers, but yeah, again, agility is a big factor. Action points / go again are a big factor in the deck, so Scab Skins is a very, very clear-cut one, right? It just helps try and give you something to do when you eventually draw really poorly, and it does feel like you will do that a little bit more often than you should in the deck currently, right? Scaling Flashback, again, just another bread and butter Brute card. Apex Bonebreaker, I think, is a little bit more serviceable than Tyrannical Rex. Although you will have the floating resources now and then, you might not necessarily have the 6 power card pitched in order to actually use Tyrannical Rex, right? Again, off of Bonebreaker Bellow, it's a little bit easier, but the majority of your buffs are 0 cost, right? And then, of course, Blood Rush Bellow, I do think, can work in the deck. It is just a really solid Brute card. Especially, again, if you shape your hand, right? You play a card that Blood Rush will miss on, and then you pitch another one into Blood Rush Bellow. You only need the 6, right? And you're golden. So it is definitely serviceable to me. And again, its draw aspect also just draws, right? It's not like Beast Within where it's looking specifically for attacks. You will just get the card value out of it. So it definitely does feel workable. Now, in terms of a deck list, we won't go over this too in depth, right? Because, I've talked for quite a while now, but we've got 3, right? We've got the stock standard Rhinar Armory deck. This is what comes out of the box. Again, there is just a whole heap of 3 costs to me that really bog down the deck. I mean, nice and quickly, we can do some draw 4s and see what exactly we could do, right? Straight away, this is not great. So it may look appealing, right? Bear Destruction, Rawhide Ramble, that's what we want to do. But how do we do that, right? Because, again, you want to pitch. So, yeah, you'd pitch Assault and Battery into either Bonebreaker Bellow or Bear Destruction, and then you're discarding one other card. So, yeah, it's okay. It's just not good enough. Because, again, if you hit the Bear Destruction, you're not really getting the value off of it. Even if you use the discarded Token Vim, you can't use it onto Bonebreaker Bellow, so most likely it won't have go again. And it's just that awkwardness of you will draw non-workable hands that just want you to block over and over again, right? Again, another 3 red, 1 yellow hand, and that's just really, really rough into 3 blues and a red. And yeah, no 6 power card to actually beat chest off of. So yeah, it is obviously a really hard thing to balance overall, trying to take advantage of beat chest and the fact that you have that controlled discard, but then to not have, misses like this. So a little bit awkward. Maybe there could have been a little bit different utility to some of the equipment pieces, but it is what it is. So yeah, if you are going to try it, I would just say be warned. It does feel a little bit lower than some of the most recent Armory decks, right? That could be a little bit of hero bias, but I think it does sort of speak on the actual deck construction and, again, the cost ratio for a lot of what you're actually trying to do to really get the full value out of your cards. Now, in terms of the other deck lists I have on offer, we have Rhinar Armory Deck Plus, which is just me tweaking it a little bit. So these are all the cards I cut out, and these are the cards I take start, essentially. Now, it's basically, just approximate value to the actual Armory deck itself, just with, again, a few of the nicer pieces that are a little bit easier to play and work a little bit better with what the deck is trying to do, at least from my perspective. I don't mean to hate on the deck so much, but yeah, I don't know. After Max broke my heart, I guess I'm just a little bit sheltered. So, yeah, this is what it is. And then in terms of this Armory deck, God, I don't know why I actually made this because the rationale behind it's pretty dumb. But essentially, this is keeping in the same vein as the Armory deck, at least again, my interpretation of what it's trying to do, which is just weird, right? Because again, it is a somewhat more optimized version, but at the same time, is probably not what you really want to be doing overall, right? It could definitely be workable. It should be a little bit more functional. Again, has more majestics, right? The idea is basically still buff. Maybe just throw out your weapon swing. So Man of Claw into Ball Breaker is, solid enough turn. I'm not going to say good, but solid enough, right? Otherwise, then you do still have those nice big attacks like Bear Swing or Bear Destruction into something. And I'm only taking 2 copies of Bear Destruction because, again, it is simply Talk of Him the first one, and then Echo Cask the second one, and hope that everything lines up, right? I just really wish that both of them hit weapons, right, with just Brute Attack rather than Brute Attack action card. But I can understand, that being a bit more egregious if you then stick it in KO. So, yeah, he's definitely a dampener for the current design space of Bruce, right? But we'll leave it there. I'll put the 3 deck links in the description. Feel free to take a look at them, right? Tell me what you think. But I do think I can be a little bit more confident when it comes to Brute construction, because I've played a lot more Brute than, any of the other classes that I dabble in. But we'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah.